trying to. I'll break it down into a couple of different area. Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of Brazilian ivory in the world.
Of the third world nation, where your votes will get stolen if you can vote there at all.
Welcome to Around the World with Dane Waters. I'm your host, Dane Waters. So what's going on around the world? Listen, America is one of the greatest countries in the world, if not the greatest country in the world. I mean, I'm a little biased, of course, being an American. But the reality is that, as we talked about many times on this show, is America fulfilling its international obligations? I would honestly have to say no. I mean, we have the greatest military in the world. We have the greatest ability for humanitarian aid in the world. And what I think the current administration is missing is that about America first. Unless I agree, we need to take care of America. But if we don't stay active in the world, if we don't ensure that authoritarianism doesn't take over, then we're not putting America first. And I think that that's a key distinction that we'll be talking about throughout this show and other future shows and past shows, honestly. So what's going on specifically to make me say those things? Well, President Trump decided to come out and say he's no longer going to get involved in military activities, military training with South Korea. Now, most Americans and most people around the world said, who cares? The reality is, think about what he said. He said, we don't want to do it because A, South Korea did not help America with the Iran war. Number two is because I'm very close personal friends with the head of North Korea, who's an authoritarian. And you think about those two statements. Okay, let's say that fine, for whatever reason, economically or others, you say, listen, maybe just now is not the right time to participate in these drills. Well, which I disagree with on that face anyway. But they would specifically say that you're punishing a country for not participating in a war that you decided to start, President Trump, with no clear goals. And let's talk about your goals that you have tried to talk about. Regime change, not happening. Ending their nuclear ambitions, not happening. Stopping the use of their ballistic missiles, not happening. Stopping their support for other factions like Hezbollah, Hamas, and others, not really happening. And so now we have this conversation about what's going to happen in the war. And so your biggest strategic victory is going to be reopening the Straits of Hormuz, which were open beforehand. And listen, Iran has the upper hand. But anyway, all that being said, I wish more countries had been more active in trying to stop Iran and their nuclear program. I mean, because they cannot be allowed to have a bomb under any circumstances. And just to be very clear, the reason for that is that when you have a country, Iran, specifically saying that the state of Israel, or the state of any country, shall not exist, and that our priority is to ensure that they don't exist. I mean, that they're a threat. That's like your neighbor being next door to you saying, I have got a shotgun and you're not allowed to live, and I'm going to walk next door at any time I want and kill you. I mean, that's the basic premise there. And so the world needs to understand that. Anyway, for whatever it is, but America, when the president of the United States is punishing other countries for not actively doing something, I mean, come on. I mean, and then it goes back to what I said on the last show, where President Trump said to the Ukrainian President Zelensky that, hey, we will help you produce Patriot missiles. And then he says, no, not going to do that because we can't trust you with the technology. So now that's why you see massive attacks, growing every day exponentially from the Russians against Kyiv, because they just don't have the Patriot missiles to protect themselves. The bottom line is American presidents have the ability to make whatever decisions they want. But America needs to be trusted. America, allies, I mean, potential allies, and even citizens on the street need to know that America is going to be there. And we've lost that credibility. The bottom line is that around the world, you ask any head of state, to be honest with you, you ask anybody on the street, because as I travel the world to ask, they well, we just don't know what America is going to do. We just don't know if we can trust America. And that is not the same as saying, okay, we need to make sure NATO funds itself more. European countries need to fund themselves more. I mean, that's all respectful and understandable. Clearly articulate that, make your policies known so the world knows how to operate. But right now, you've got pulling out of South Korea, sends a very strong, and specifically saying you support North Korea, sends a very specific message to a country like China, who's going to act against Taiwan. There's no doubt about it. Anyway, I can go on and on about it. Anyway, that's enough of my diatribe. But what's happening around the world is very clear. America's credibility and reputation um, is in the toilet, in my opinion, and that's a problem, and we need to work on it because America is the greatest country in the world, and we need to bear that responsibility and do what we have to do around the world. Anyway, let's take a quick break from Around the World with Dane Waters, and we will be back with our first guest. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. I am your host, Dane Waters. Very honored to have with me Antoni Barakat. Is it Barakat? Barakat. Is that how do you say your last?
You're saying the two versions are the same.
Oh, they're the same?
It sounds the same to me.
That's the same as you. Anyway, Antoni, thanks for being with me. You're currently in Beirut. You've been on the show before, and you're a great guy and a good friend. So let's just get into this and talk about. There's so many things to talk about. First, I mean, just give me the overall feeling about what's going on in Lebanon. And as a Lebanese, I mean, in the region, we always talk about Iran, we talk about Israel, we talk about Syria. A lot's going on in Lebanon. So give me your take on things.
Of course. Thank you, Dan. It's always a pleasure to discuss and to be part of this. Well, in Lebanon, there's two realities happening at once. We have, on the one hand, we have the peace talks happening now in Rome with the Israeli team and the Lebanese team with the American support. This is one thing in diplomacy. The other thing happening on the ground are continuous escalations and wars. They turn off and on from a month to another, but still nothing has ended. We don't have ended situations yet. So we have now in the south escalations. The Israeli forces are trying to take down different hills that are, in their eyes, strategic to monitoring the area. And Hezbollah is also trying not to allow this to happen. And we're in this phase where there's negotiations on one hand, and the other hand, it seems like the ground doesn't even know or care what's happening in Rome, in the closed rooms for talking. So it looks like two countries at the same time working, and no one knows about the other, which is a bit odd to see and to live.
Well, yeah, it's the same thing like, where America, we were supposedly in negotiations with Iran, and then at the same time, military action taking place. It's kind of a surreal. Yeah, I think as a human being, I mean, one problem that we face globally is like who to believe. What is the truth of what's going on, which is why I like to have people like you on the show. So just for the background, as we were talking about pre-show, I mean, this show is now listened to in over 100 countries, and And so, you and I know about Lebanon and what's going on in Lebanon, the conflict, but I'm going to try to boil it down to very simplistic, simplistically, but for the people to understand. I mean, the reality is Lebanon's a beautiful place, great country. Lebanese people are amazing, but the issue for the Israelis and most people is that Hezbollah, many people would say, has took over the country. Now, Hezbollah is funded by Iran. There's two parts of Hezbollah. And correct me on this. There's two parts of Hezbollah. There's the political part, and then there's the military part. And Hezbollah is a political party that actually has representation in the parliament in Lebanon. They were elected to be part of that. But help us understand: is Hezbollah a problem in Lebanon?
Of course, as short answer, of course it is. It's the problem of Lebanon since years and years before this war started. That actually Hezbollah got Lebanon involved into it. If we want to be honest about this, because it started as a war in Gaza between Hamas and Israel, and we imported it the day after, on October 8th, Hezbollah started attacking right on the border, and it stayed like this for months and months, and then things escalated because no one could bear this continuing forever. So of course,
Oh, well,
Hezbollah.
let me interrupt you there to make it very clear. So this is a very important distinction. So after October 8th, or after what happened between Hamas and Israel, Hezbollah got involved.
Yes.
Lebanon did not get involved. Hezbollah got involved, right?
Of course, Lebanon never gets Lebanon in terms of the official Lebanese army and the government usually don't get involved into foreign fights with any country, actually, because we know the burden of this on the people and the capacities of the Lebanese army. So we don't get uncalculated things that Hezbollah did. But Hezbollah did this because it was asked to do this by Iran, and they don't have any leverage on saying yes or no. So they did this, and then things started to escalate, and it affected the whole country. South, the suburb of Beirut, also the south, the whole south, also in the Bekaa area in the north, and everywhere we got displacement everywhere, and we got more than 1 million people. At its peak, it was more than 1 million Lebanese leaving their houses and or getting this, or their houses getting destroyed, or leaving their houses because it was a non-livable place to be in these areas. And now what's happening is that they signed several, stop the fight treaties, or whatever they call them, and for a way or another, and from one side or another, whether it's Israel or Hezbollah, they breach these agreements like an hour or 2 hours after they got signed. And we're in this loop since 2023, and it's never ending. And going back to the question whether Hezbollah is a problem, Hezbollah is a problem, and now it's officially recognized as a big threat to Lebanon by the Lebanese government and the president. So these are important political improvements that got in Lebanon, because we had a new government a year ago and a new president elected. They don't cooperate, or they don't try to use simple words or to make it easier for the Lebanese, and to say like we're all together in this or whatsoever. They're very clear about Hezbollah being a problem and being an illegal armed militia in Lebanon. So they said this bluntly, and they took a decision to disarm Hezbollah. But yet this is just on paper, because on the ground very little improvements happened from the Lebanese government, at least, because Israel, they are saying that they're doing this on their own if the Lebanese government doesn't want to interfere, or they don't have the capacities. So we're in this loop where the government and the army wants Israel to withdraw, because they say we can take this and handle this and disarm Hezbollah, and the Israeli side are not buying this story, because it's been like this for years now.
So this is an important distinction here to understand. So the Lebanese government and then the Lebanese Armed Forces say that, which for the world to understand, for the Lebanese government to actually say blatantly that Hezbollah is a problem is a big, huge step. Okay, that's a huge step, right? Because Hezbollah,
of course, because as you mentioned, Hezbollah used to control the majority of the government and the parliament. In parallel with this militia or political side, they have a political arm, and they have a political arm, and they also have people in parliament and government, and they used to control 360 Lebanon from all angles, and now being put on the side completely on the political side is quite impressive for Lebanon to see. And there's still yet the military side, which is weakened 10 times maybe less than it was when it was on its peak in the 2020, 2021, or even less. But still, it's still there and still threatens the people. It doesn't threaten much Israel anymore, to be honest with you, but it still threatens the Lebanese people internally, which is insane. Because I want just to add one thing. Hezbollah did agree to withdraw from the borders with Israel within the 5-kilometer range and to go back. They did agree on this, and they actually did it, which is even more worrying, and they didn't agree to disarm themselves, which is more worrying, meaning that having these arms are not really to fight Israel or to defend Lebanon in any way. It's to use them internally, because if you go back 5 kilometers and turn back on the Lebanese people, why do you need arms if you're not on the borders? Which both things are bad, but I mean, like, in if you put it like this, they don't really care in the coming years to fight Israel, and they need to have their arms to have this upper hand over the Lebanese internally.
No, okay, so that's a good point to make too. But let me ask you, so from, most people watching will say, okay, well, you're in a country, the government and the military of that country say Hezbollah is a problem. Yet, why can't they actually disarm Hezbollah? I mean, it's like if you're in, if you're in Washington, D.C., and the government says, hey, there's a militia here, get rid of them, and yet you can't get rid of them. So help the world understand why the government and the military, which are unified, and for the most part, the Lebanese people are unified against
Of
Hezbollah.
course.
Why can't you get rid of Hezbollah?
Okay, there's two main reasons. The main reason is that the Lebanese army, you cannot you cannot compare it to like what's happening in Washington or other places, because the Lebanese army in some places in Lebanon is technically weaker than Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is trained to fight these kinds of wars, and the Lebanese army is a different type of army. It's more defending and doing other stuff. But this is not the main issue. The main issue is still political, because there is still part in the Lebanese political elite, as we try to call them, that have empathy or collaboration with Hezbollah and trying to disseminate this, or to make this path as long as possible. So there is the main people to blame are the people in government, not all of them, of course, but the ones trying to push back. So it's not one full entity like a rock or something. It's a bit more naive. It's a bit more. It's not a solid form. It's more like a liquid form, where like a lot of things communicate and integrate together. And this is the main problem. And we're getting rid actually of these politicians in key places, but still there is still a lot of them. And from the closed channels or rooms, you can see that Iran now is trying again to whether buy or whether to disseminate people from the Lebanese governments to try not to do this or not to work on this. And we can see it. We can see it in the statements of officials from Iran saying that we are helping Lebanon in some ways, helping Lebanon, meaning helping Hezbollah to continue doing what they're doing, and they're not listening or abiding by the rules of Lebanon inside of Lebanon. So, for instance, we have this Iranian ambassador to Lebanon because they try to have influence inside Lebanese politics. The foreign ministry asked the ambassador to leave the country for good, and the ambassador did not listen and did not leave the country, and he stayed inside the embassy. And since the embassy is technically an Iranian soil, you know how like diplomacy works, he's still here. He's still here, and he's not recognized as a diplomat anymore, but he's still here, and he didn't leave. this is gives you a like a clear view of how Iran sees Lebanon, and this is the same problem with Hezbollah. For example, it's not that easy to apply the things that you say as a government on the ground.
Yeah, no, and
So
I also, yeah, well, let's see, because I had a former, I've had several former generals from the Lebanese Armed Forces on my show, and one was a General Halou, and we were talking about what I want the audience also to understand is that, and I listen, I have tremendous respect for the Lebanese Armed Forces. I just wanted to say that up front. But however, that being said, there is a contingent. One of the concerns among the LAF is that there is a contingent of those soldiers that are in the LAF that are sympathetic to Hezbollah, right? I
of
mean,
course,
just to once again put in these terms, Hezbollah is a Shia organization. It's a Shia based. And so there are a lot of Shia military officials and soldiers. And so one of the concerns is that the LAF can't be as strong as they would like against Hezbollah because there are soldiers within the LAF that are sympathetic to Hezbollah. Is that correct?
yes, that's correct. But also, saying this, I have to be honest with you. Like, whatever the cost of confronting Hezbollah on the ground for real internally would be easier than having a third wave war with Israel and Lebanon. So this is the problem with the Lebanese, with the army of, or not the army, or the people controlling the army from the outside, or the top generals. They need to understand that it's not whether the army has some internal problems with the people having empathy with Hezbollah. It's either this or not having anything at all. It's either this or having another war with Israel. And choosing the first one, I think, is a wiser choice than having an open scale big war again, third time in a row, 3 years in 3 years time. So yes, there is this concern, but having this concern should not stop the army from doing its job. So this is also this is also what people are seeing, because seeing an army that people they look up to in terms of this is the only official armed party that we want in Lebanon, party in terms of you know what I mean, and seeing them not being able to do anything, this breaks this image in the eyes of Lebanese, and they try to find alternatives, and this is what's even more worrying than not pushing for an actual combat with Hezbollah, if this is the way that Hezbollah wants this to go. Because Hezbollah can easily say, okay, let's agree on this without fighting, because we don't want to fight with Lebanese. And if they don't want to say this, then this is Hezbollah's problem. And even if the army would pay for this, armies pay for stuff. So this is how we see it.
Well, when I was there in Lebanon, I mean, in all the polling that we had done, I mean, the LAF, the Lebanese Armed Forces, always polled well. There's always tremendous respect for the LAF, and actually the current president, President Aoun, is a former head of the LAF.
Sure.
Would you say that the LAF still has the support of the Lebanese people, or do you think that their
Of course.
standing has fallen at all?
No, of course they do have the support. They do have a big support. Of course, things struggle sometimes or tremble sometimes, but the more time we take to take real actions against what's happening, against the illegal fights that Hezbollah is fighting and having arms outside of the control of the state, the more the less people would have respect for this entity, which is unsafe not to have respect for the entity, because we had the Lebanese civil war before in the 70s, and when the faith in the state or the Lebanese official army faded in the eyes of the people, they found alternatives, people going to each and every country to get arms and fighting each other. And this is what's at stake right now. And this is important for the army to see as well. I'm talking about the head of the army, to see that it's either this or chaos, and no other options are on the table, unfortunately, because Hezbollah are not cooperating.
Yeah. Well, it used to be in the past as well in Lebanon that there was a lot of, the Israelis weren't exactly loved by the Lebanese people. But if you look at what's going on now, I mean, where do you think if you had to compare the public support for Hezbollah versus the public support for Israel, I mean, what is the perception of Israel now among the Lebanese people?
Okay, well, this differs a lot from one area to another, if I have to say it by areas, but it's actually one political sect or religious sect to another. My generation, we never saw anything harmful from the Israeli army or from Israel, to the things that we can remember, especially people living a bit far further from the borders. You know what I mean? So we
Yeah.
grew up not having any problems with this. Um, until recently, and until recently, that we're seeing everything's happening in Lebanon and the region, especially in Gaza. It's really hard for us in the country to create, and I don't know how to say, to create empathy for this kind of things happening around us, even if by theory what Israel is doing is by default helping Lebanese people. This is not the aim for Israel. They're not doing this to help us, but I mean, this is helpful for the people
Yes.
in Lebanon because they're otherwise unable to do this on their own. This is something, and having empathy or support for the things happening by the Israeli army in the region is something else. So, and it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit how to say it? It's a bit unnatural to have this. Whether you can see all over the world, people are condemning things like this, and you see like people in the region, especially like very close neighbors, it's a door to next to another, supporting this,
Yeah.
which is not very common to see.
Well, I mean, it's an important point to make out. I mean, it's not like the Israeli military or Israel is coming to Lebanon's defense. They're just trying to get rid of Hezbollah, which is detrimental to them. So, and yeah, I mean, I've known several people, and I still know several people in Lebanon who lived during the occupation by Israel, and they had tanks on the streets and all that kind of stuff. So it's just, so yeah, if I were in Lebanon,
And sometimes, when you try to think about it otherwise, it's very quickly they do stuff, and you see stuff online that takes this idea back from your mind. For instance, for Christians, for example, is the Israeli army or the Israeli political thinks that Lebanese Christians have more empathy than others, because there's some people that go online and talk about this. But for example, like several weeks ago, you can see like Israeli army people, soldiers in South Lebanon destroying, for example, Christian monuments for no reason. These are monuments; they cannot fight or something, and it's for no reason, just for the purpose of it, which have a lot, which yeah, creates a lot of questions in our minds about this ideology and this school of learning how to deal with things in the army there. So it's a bit, it's a bit weird for us to see this, and it's a bit even weirder to see anyone to have like empathy or good feelings towards this.
yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is, I mean, the question becomes, even when Israel gets rid of Hezbollah, and of course, Hezbollah is also, it's not like physical. Hezbollah is a belief system. Hezbollah,
Of
it's a
course.
political party, so it's not like every member of Hezbollah is ever going to cease to exist. And do we really think that Israel is actually going to leave, even if they are successful? And then the question is, how do they define that they're successful? But let's talk about some practical issues. I mean, Lebanon is a small country, number one. Okay, very small country. I think there's only, like 4 million people that live in Lebanon. I mean, okay. So, for the world to understand how small this place is. And then so you have the Israelis who have gone into the southern part of the country. They have forced the evacuation of like 1 million Lebanese. So talk to us about where these Lebanese are going.
Of course. So things now are a bit settled more than what it used to be like 4, 5, 6 months ago, because we have some sort of stability outside the borders, like not in the front line villages outside. It's things settled a bit. But on its peak, when we had like this full scale, I can say it, war, we used to have, of course, more than 1 million people out of 4, maybe 5 million people living in Lebanon, more than 1 million displaced. And on a very short time, it's not like on the span of a year, it's like 4 days, which is insane to handle in any country. And how about a country also have political problems, economical collapse, and everything happening all at once, and the war hasn't stopped. It's not like we have a pause and people are going. It's like with bombs continuing. So a lot of public schools got transformed into shelters. Some people who didn't want to share their lives with like 200, 300 other people, they chose to buy tents and sit on the streets on their own, and they refused the government to take them to shelters because they think this is better alternative for them for whatever reason. So you can feel it, you can see you can feel it, and you can see the people, you can see the look and feel of the country changing by the minute of what's happening. And the biggest problem is uncertainty, because you can go to shelter and knowing that, for example, it's a 1 month, 2 weeks problem, and then you go back, but there's no timeline for anything. And schools got cancelled, and people transformed to studying online, which is even worse for Lebanon, because if we have one of the problems are the infrastructure of everything. Actually, we have a very slow internet connection, for example, and no student can actually learn anything online because of all of this. So also not having the schools operating as normal is also a problem.
Well, so well, the other thing is, I mean, for people who haven't been to Lebanon, when you think about 1 million people leaving the southern part, there's really only one major road in the south to the north. There's a few small. I mean, I'm just trying to personally visualize 1 million people leaving the south and going to the north. That's number one. But number two, how do you feel about it's a very divided country. You got the Christians, which are then divided among Catholics and Protestants and all this kind of stuff. Then you got the Sunnis and the Shias. And the Christian community is very established, primarily in Beirut, Astrafia area, those kind of areas. How is it? Do you feel that there's a more of a division now, and animosity? I lost you, Antoni. Your video went away. But are you seeing that there's more animosity growing between the Christians and the Muslims because of what's going on? I lost you, Antoni. We're going to take a quick pause here. Anyways, take a quick pause from Around the World with Dane Waters, and we'll be back in a second. Thanks a lot. Hello, I'm here in, where am I? Indianapolis, Indiana. I had to remember there for a second. Just here for a couple of things for work, but I just doing a man on the street kind of discussion. And so I'm very honored to run into my friend Paul Jacob, who happens to be here as well. And I have a few questions for you. Hey,
doing good.
Get that pretty little face in right there. So, hey, listen, so a lot's going on in America. This is the first time I've been on U.S. soil in a while, but just kind of give us a quick update about, what the feeling you're feeling from people on the street.
Well, I think there's a lot of angst. I saw something earlier on television where they were talking about how the fundamentals of the economy are pretty good in the stock market, and that they did man on the street type interviews, and people were asked about the economy going into a mall, and they were saying they didn't feel very good about it. And then, of course, they're coming out with all kinds of things that they've bought and shopping bags full and so on. So there's a lot of I think just uncertainty about what's going to happen next. And with the Iran war, with gas prices what they are, I don't think anybody feels like it's a great economy.
Listen, a lot of Americans don't have money in the stock market. I mean, really, if you talk about the middle class or the higher middle class and up, they have money in the stock market. The average person on the street really doesn't. When you talk about oil prices, I mean, the people I've talked to, they're concerned about just being able to pay for gas to commute to work. I mean,
Are you feeling that as well?
I don't. I work from my house. I don't commute. But if I was commuting, the gas prices would be killing me. So you're right. And most people, I'm not a wealthy guy who's looking at my stocks every day, but most people don't have stocks, and most people are working and trying to stay ahead of the tax man and the rent collector and so on. And those gas prices are devastating. And when you think about it, Donald Trump came into office largely because the Biden administration had such inflation, and gas prices that were low in 2019 were very high in 2024, and had been throughout his term. So, and then we found when Trump came in and people were complaining about the economy, he was saying the same thing that Biden did, which is it's really a pretty good economy. Everybody's economy is individual. And there are a lot of people in America who just don't feel good about it. And part of that, I think, is being told by our elected officials constantly how good everything is, even when we know it's not.
Well, I need to bring this up about the Iran war. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about it, and it's just one of those conflicts that, honestly, I don't even understand anymore. I mean, what's your take on it?
I don't like war. I especially don't like wars that you don't have to fight. It just seems like you never want to fight a war you don't have to fight. And now we're over there, and if we leave, it's somehow defeat, and I don't see how we win, so to speak, even though we've been told we've won a lot. It doesn't seem to be the case. But I don't know how you could win in terms of securing the Strait of Hormuz or securing the nuclear material without American boots on the ground. And that's something that I think the countries opposed to the war, they sure don't want to see it escalate with boots on the ground. So it's a problem.
Well, I agree it's a problem. And if we were to put boots on the ground, well, first of all, I have to be very clear. I believe there should be regime change. Iran with nuclear weapons scares the hell out of me. Ballistic missile scares the hell out of me. But we should not be the only country fighting this conflict. If they are such a threat, other countries need to be standing up. Why do you think other countries aren't?
Well, let's just go back to the beginning of this. Not only was Congress not consulted, and Congress is in such ill repute among the American people that maybe they don't care, but the American people weren't really consulted, weren't really talked with about, hey, we've got to go do some things in Iran. And when you don't talk to the American people, when you don't talk to allies, when you don't talk to Congress, you get involved in something where you don't have support. And that's just, it's not the way to run any country, much less a country that is so engaged in all parts of the world.
I guess the last question, there's always this thing in politics, is it your life better off today than it was 4 years ago, or in this case, 2 years ago? How would you answer that question?
Well, I like to think that my life's getting better, even though I'm getting older and is a little closer to the Grim Reaper. But I think as a country, there was such hope 2 years ago, and not because it wasn't all because Donald Trump's going to save us, but just that people could go and make some changes, and we keep changing. But the public isn't satisfied. They elect Democrats, they're very unsatisfied. And I don't mean Republicans are unsatisfied, Democrats are unsatisfied. And then we elect Republicans and we're unsatisfied. And I don't mean just Democrats, I mean Republicans too. So we're switching out parties, but we're not getting what we want. And I think it's an argument for why we need more direct democracy, so we don't have to filter everything through politicians. We need things like term limits so that we can get some change in politicians. There's a lot of things that need to happen in America, and it's critical for us. But as you know, you look around the world and the important role that we play. It's important for the whole world that we get our together.
Yeah, no, I agree. Listen, Paul, it's good to see you on the streets of Indianapolis, Indiana. And thanks for, let me turn this around. Dane Waters, Around the World with Dane Waters, and we'll be back real quick with our next guest. Thanks a lot.
Okay, welcome back to America. What am I talking about? Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters, and Antoni is back now. So we were just talking about these issues, right? Internet connections and infrastructure issues. Well, welcome back. Once again, you guys are in the middle of a conflict. So I don't know if you heard my question, but I was asking about, the religious divide now, because, Christians are well established in the country in certain parts of Beirut specifically. I would say, I'm overgeneralizing here, most of the people from the South who moved were Muslim, moving in. There's always this animosity in the previous about Syrian refugees coming in. But how is the relationships? I mean, how are the Christians and the Muslims getting along now that there's a greater influx of them into Beirut?
Well, it's a very important question, and most of the people um, uh, don't think about these issues for other countries. But since you're a bit in the loop of what's happening, so it's a big problem for us because uh, we're a small country, as you mentioned, but also we're kind of different countries merged into one country geographically, and everyone lives in their areas. So when people moved from one area to another, there's a big disbalance that happened, which is very not very modern to talk about this like this, but this is what's happening, and this is true. So what happened were there were strict rules put in place by local governments, which are the municipalities. For example, everyone who wants to rent a house or something or an apartment in a different area, they need to scan their credentials to see if they are a potential target for anything that might happen, not to put other people in the building in danger or the area. And people were very frightened about this because Israel is doesn't matter if there's one person in the building who's like a military person working with Hezbollah, they can take down the whole building with everyone and anyone living in it, even though people don't really know who's their neighbor. So because this happened once or twice or several times, so to make this less likely, there were very strict rules by governments and local municipalities. But in terms of people were very hospitable towards one another because they took politics aside for a moment just to welcome kids and women who had no other places to be. But in terms of the windows were the windows put in place by the municipalities or the local governments, they were actually strict rules that you might think they're not very ethical other in other places, but they are important and useful and very important to be in place in Lebanon.
And I think this is what our audience needs to understand. I mean, we live in a world, we talk about conflict all the time. We talk about Ukraine, we talk about wars, we talk about what's happening in Iran and, in the US. But I think for the average audience, they don't understand what the impact of conflict is and war is. So there in Lebanon, for example, I mean, I think this is important. You bring us a very important point, is that, yeah, when Israel decides to take out a Hezbollah commander, that Hezbollah commander can be living in an apartment building with 30 Christians, and I mean, I'm not trying to make this a religious divide, but innocents do die. They do. And so when you have municipalities deciding, okay, well, you have to live here, you have to live there, because that's the practical reality, thinking that Israel will strike and destroy a building, and these are the practical things. But let me ask you this, we have a few minutes here left. Let's talk about the human toll of this, okay? Psychologically, as I said, I've had people on the show from Ukraine, and just they've been at war for 4 years, and just the mental impact. Talk to us about, like, from you personally. I mean, what is the mental impact, emotional impact of this conflict?
Of course, well, also a bit bigger than the conflict. It's important to see where were we in the past 5 to 6 years. So we had, of course, the COVID, like everyone else in the world. In the same year of the COVID happening, we had the Beirut explosion, which is the port explosion, which is one of the biggest explosions ever in any country, devastating. A year prior to this, we had a very big economical collapse, the biggest ever in a lot of countries near us. People lost their money in the banks. The banks couldn't afford giving back the people's money. A lot of entities closed. A lot of the local currency devaluation was extremely important. Then we had this explosion, and then we had COVID, and then we had the war. In the 5 year span, in this spectrum of 5 years, all of this happening, it's like really, I have friends living in Europe or other places in the world. Even, for example, grandparents, parents, and their kids combined, they don't live big problems like this in their lifetime, and we had this on our lives for 5 years, which is insane. I'm saying that the war is extremely big thing, but it also came along with a lot of other burdens on our shoulders as well. So you can't really imagine what this has been to young people, for example, living in Lebanon. For example, I graduated in 2020, and I haven't seen any normal day after this, to be honest. So it's like growing 10 years every year, and you don't realize this until something settle and you take a breath and you think, oh wow, I lost a lot of years waiting for something and I don't know what. And the most important thing is, like, it's similar to Ukraine as well. People like us, for example, not being able to do anything, and they just bear the consequences, but they cannot actually change stuff on the ground, except like helping stuff or opening, like, open aid kitchens for people, like, and help stuff similar, very small stuff that won't change anything on the big scale, and you just receive the consequences and you cannot do anything about it. So it's extremely challenging. It's extremely challenging, and you can see it. You can see it, for example, if you see our generation coming from Lebanon or other parts of the world living in such situations, and you see other people from different areas, you can see that we don't see things anymore the same in terms of future. For example, in terms of planning, we don't plan much, because every time we plan, nothing would happen, because we cannot stick to plans. We need to change our plans, like, in these interviews where people say, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, dude, it's
Yeah.
6 months from now. I really don't know, because, for example, in our office we have a media outlet, as you know, in Lebanon. So we plan the content for like 2-3 months, and we never stick to the plan. We always change the plan, because things changing very quickly. So we stop planning and we're living like week per week. And this also applies to everyone doing anything in the country. Even like if you plan like a trip, for example, you are fed up with all the situation, you put some money aside and you need to go to Greece, for example, for a vacation. You cannot plan, because you never know where the planes would got cancelled and the airport would shut down, and it's insane. You cannot plan even the things that you look up to. For example, if you can afford one trip per year, you cannot even plan this, because even this is not certain. So this uncertainty is even more killing than actual bombs, because it takes some happiness, and it takes um, you think the things that you look up to. So it's insane.
Well, let me ask this question: why haven't you left?
I'm hearing this a lot, and I honestly don't know the answer about this. I honestly don't know the answer. I travel a lot because of work, and we have summits in the region with other media outlets. But I think that there is still something to be done, even if I can see it in my bare eyes right now. To be honest, it's not clear what the path is, but there is something that might pop up, and we need people to stay. We need people to do stuff later on, when the skies will become a bit less gray than this. We need people to be here to take the rubbish from the streets. It's I have no idea why this is, and I have a lot of friends going out, and you've been here, and like, education in Lebanon is still very developed, and a lot of students go to study abroad, especially in France and other places, and they succeed completely, and they end up working with EY and strategy, and not living, not sleeping, but also gaining a lot of money. I don't think this is the path that I want to go to, like doing something for purpose, even if it's not very lucrative, or not very you don't see a proper changing happening because of you right away, but like having a bigger purpose, I think, is sometimes important.
Well, I think that what you're doing is amazing. I think that, for individuals, I think, yeah, this, the easy route, listen, not to be disrespectful for anyone who's left Lebanon, because I know people who have left Lebanon. I mean, the easier route is to leave Lebanon. And the harder, more difficult thing is to stay. And I want to commend you for what you're doing. And because you're there, you're
Thank
like,
you.
for example, talking to me, educating the world, because the world needs to understand. I mean, especially in a global, world where there's a lot of conflict. But people don't understand
course.
the personal
Of
toll.
course, and also we need to say that to the people that this is not Hezbollah land, this is Lebanon, and there's tons and tons of people who don't share these values and who don't agree of what things are doing. So Western media sometimes, because there's a lot of things happening. I'm not blaming anyone, but they tend sometimes to globalize issues in the country. For example, this is the country, but it's not. So there's a lot of people in Lebanon taking results of what Hezbollah is doing and what Israel is doing at the same time, and we don't agree with either of these, and we're bearing the consequences of the both sides. And I think these people are worth listening to and giving them space to express themselves. And I thank you so much for this, for having this over and over, because it's important for the people to see that there's a lot of people here just wanting to live a healthy, normal life, working and having friends and having beer on the weekend, and that's it.
No, I agree. And so the world, to make that very clear, Lebanon is not Iran. Lebanon is its own sovereign country. The Lebanese people are amazing people, and what Iran and Hezbollah have done to the country, they're an occupying force. They really are. I mean, when you get down to it, it's just like any country being occupied by a foreign
And
force.
it's harder than any actual occupying force, because it's within it and it's not official and you cannot say it, and it's harder to get rid of because it's not clear. And this is harder, and this is even more complicated than actual people coming and occupying you.
Yeah, no, they're like, they get their tentacles everywhere, and it's like they've rooted their trees, and it's almost impossible to get rid of them. But when I lived there, I mean, it's dangerous. I mean, it's just not a, if you mess with Hezbollah, they kill you. I mean, it's not like that they are nice people, and it's just a horrifying experience. Listen, sadly we're out of time, Antoni. I appreciate. Oh, you know what? I just want to make sure I was recording, and I was recording. I do believe that I was. Yes, there we go. I'm not very smart these days, Antoni. I'm just not. Anyway, I did hit the record button for the second time. Phew, I was getting a little worried there. But listen, hey, I really appreciate it. You. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And once again, seriously, I'm glad you're growing your hair.
And I really value this friendship, Dane, even if we don't speak from often, but always the conversations are very fruitful. And I wish you bright days like the background that you have. And blue skies and good sun, and yeah.
I appreciate that. Well, listen, you take care. And anyway, so thanks for being with Dane Waters, Around the World with Dane Waters, and we will see you again next week. Antoni, thanks a lot. Take care.
What we've always maintained is in the Nevertron movement. I'll break it down into a couple of different Syria, Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of Brazilian ivory in the world.
Live in a third world nation where your votes will get stolen if you can vote